Namaste, everyone, and welcome. My name is Arnav Patel. I'm the Hindu Yuva coordinator for the Southwest region of the United States, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar. Tonight's event is brought to you by Hindu Yuva, the largest Hindu organization on campuses across North America, with over 100 university chapters and 45 high school chapters nationwide. Hindu Yuva, which stands for Youth for Unity, Virtues, and Action, is built around the 4 Ps: practice, promote, preserve, and protect, helping young Hindus deepen their understanding of the Dharma and carry it forward with confidence in their everyday lives. Through regular meetings, community events, and seva, or selfless service, Hindu Yuva chapters give back to the communities they're part of while building a strong sense of purpose and belonging among their members. Tonight marks the first of a 4-part webinar series called Dharma in America, held in honor of America's 250th anniversary. Over the course of this summer, we'll explore 4 dimensions of Dharma: personal, family, community, and national, through conversations with well-known public figures about how they've navigated their own Dharma while building their lives here in America. Before we get started, I'd like to let you all know that we will be taking questions that will be answered towards the end of the session. So please direct all your questions you have in the chat either on YouTube or Facebook. Tonight's session focuses on personal dharma, a concept rooted in Hindu philosophy that reflects one's individual path, responsibilities, and sense of purpose. In a world often driven by external definitions of success, many young people today are navigating deeper questions around meaning, direction, identity, and even fulfillment. Through a podcast-style conversation, we'll hear how our guest has shaped her own life across career, values, and personal growth, and how she defines impact, makes decisions, and balances ambition with inner alignment. Our goal tonight is to make personal dharma feel tangible and relevant through a real lived story. And we have an incredible guest to help us do that. Joining us tonight is Dr. Darshana R. Patel, an assembly member for California's 76th District. Dr. Patel is a research scientist by training with a BA in biochemistry from Occidental College and a PhD in biophysics from UC Irvine. And she has built a career in biotechnology research before transitioning into public service, serving as a school board president before her election to the state assembly in 2024. We're very, very excited to hear her story tonight. Guiding tonight's conversation is our moderator, Arnav Mankad. Arnav is from Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering from Boston University. He's an incoming master's student in Biomedical Data Science at Johns Hopkins University and is a full-time fellow with Hindu Yuva. With that, I'll hand it off to Arnav to get us started.
Namaste, and thank you so much for being here, Darshana ji. Let's jump right into the webinar with our first question. The first question is, what values did your parents instill in you that continue to shape the way that you live and lead today?
Namaste, everyone. It's so great to be with you all here today and to have this conversation. I must say in the beginning that never in a million years did I think I would ever be in a position to be a role model. Some examples of values that I was raised with growing up was about simply just doing your duty. And I think I would challenge my mom on a regular basis. What does it mean to do your duty? Is a bank robber, and I would ask her this question, is a bank robber doing his duty? And, as a kid, when you challenge your parents with these notions, it engages them in very deep conversations around what is duty and who are the people that are carrying out those duties. And one of her answers that she would give me, granted, I was like 6 or 7 at the time, so it was a very simplified answer, was the bank robber does his duties so that the law enforcement people can do their duties. And ultimately, it becomes a cycle of dharma and karma in how we live our lives. And so, very much so grounded in what is your personal responsibility and what is your responsibility to society, and how can we make the world a better place was always something that we talked about at home.
That's really, really awesome. I think you already kind of touched on this a little bit when you talked about doing your duty and how that's an integral part of your personal dharma. And so, just to continue with that, with the next question, when we speak about personal dharma, as we already talked about a little bit,
Mhm.
we mean the purpose, the responsibilities, and the values that sort of guide the way that someone lives and makes decisions. And you already talked about how your duty is really important to you, and it's
Yeah.
something that you grew up learning about. But in general, does this understanding of personal dharma kind of resonate with you? And along with what you've already discussed, what are some things that kind of define personal dharma in your own life?
So that's a great question. When we were growing up, we had, it was the 60s and 70s. I was born in the 70s. My parents came here in the late 1960s. The world was really quite a different place. We didn't have a temple anywhere for hundreds of miles around us. I think the closest temple was a Hare Krishna temple that was still hours, multiple hours journey from our home. And so we had this copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and it was beautifully illustrated. And my brothers and I would sit and just flip open to the pages, and we couldn't quite understand the deep level of philosophy that was being discussed. But there was one picture that always captivated me. And that was the picture of the cycle of life from the baby being born through the youth years, through young adult years, and then older adult years into old age. And it sunk in very deeply that every phase of life you have a role and a responsibility. And frankly, that was very calming. It was very assuring that, hey, as a kid, I get to play, and that is part of my duty. I get to focus on education, and that is part of my duty. Also, knowing that later on in life, there would be a time to really focus on hard work. And as long as you made those investments and you did all that playing and learning through play in your early years, you had this opportunity later in life to apply all of that learning in a very productive kind of way. So, Dharma has always been there for me. And my mother-in-law also has some wonderful stories that she shared with me. I'm one of those fortunate people that, although I lost my mom at age 14, I ended up marrying into a very wonderful family with an amazingly philosophical mother-in-law. And we chat about these things all the time. And she was talking about how in her building in India, there was nobody there to clean the sewage pipes. And so if they wanted to have the toilets flowing, she ended up having to do that. And while at birth that may not have been her duty to do that, it became a responsibility. And so duty changes as we grow and we live in different environments and we have different spaces that we're existing in, different people that we work with. Your duty may shift and it may look different. But at the end of the day, it is having a sense of personal responsibility and stepping up where you need to step up, whatever that looks like. And we can't always predict what that's going to look like. I'm sure my husband's mom, my mother-in-law never knew that she was the daughter of a priest in a temple. She never thought that she would be in this position to do this. And yet here she found herself having to do this so that her family could be well cared for. And it was a story that really kind of resonates with me that you may not know what that's going to look like. And you have to just step up. And ultimately, that is your duty, is stepping up, whether someone's looking or not, whether you're getting credit or not.
Absolutely. I think what you said about how duty changes over time and it's different at different phases of life for person to person, I think that
Yeah.
resonates really well with our audience. And so I think one thing that I want to ask to follow up on that question,
Yeah.
you talked a lot about how playing is a really important part of our duty as children, and
Mhm.
how doing something else that's meaningful to the world kind of becomes our duty as we grow up. And I wanted to ask if that has anything to do with how you decided your career trajectory from the very beginning, and whether that perspective stayed with you as you navigated your way through different phases of your career.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think nowadays, especially young people that are growing up, they probably encountered a lifestyle where a lot of their free time wasn't free time actually, it was structured. Even their extracurricular activities were very structured. And unfortunately, while that's great for learning, academic components of your life or maybe focusing yourself early, the experience and the learning you develop when you're free playing, having to navigate different situations of people of different ages when no adults are controlling the way discourse is happening, being creative, problem solving, figuring out how to reach compromises. Free play was such an important, I believe, was such an important part of my childhood growing up. I had two older brothers. We would play with neighborhood kids of all different ages and different ethnicities and different backgrounds. And that meant we were navigating very complex interrelational situations at a very young age. And I think having that experience is very important. So, free play, while no one would have ever said that was our duty at the time, it felt in hindsight amazing that I had the opportunity to do that. And so I tried to give that to my children as well. I have three daughters. One is 21 and she's a rising senior in college. One is 18 and she'll be a sophomore in college. And my youngest is almost 16. She'll be 16 on Tuesday. And we try to allow them to have a lot of free play, time to just explore, play with cardboard boxes and all of that, because you develop skills that you put in your back pocket. And even in your structured activities as a young person, you put skills in your back pocket and you save them for later. You never know when they're going to be useful. Any room you walk into, there's going to be a gold nugget of information that you want to save for another time. So, I think cell phones have changed the way we interact with boredom. We don't allow ourselves to be bored. And I think being bored is part of learning how to be at peace with your thoughts and sitting in your thoughts and kind of exploring what you're thinking. And that leads to the ability to problem solve in very different ways when you enter into your work life, whatever that may look like. I have found that to be very helpful, pulling out skills that I keep in my back pocket. I don't know if that really answered the question, and I'm happy to rephrase if you have a follow up again.
No, no, it absolutely does. I think that it really makes sense that the process of free play and the process of kind of navigating your way through life when you're younger itself, I think it really helps when you're older, when you're actually forced into a situation where you have to navigate the life
Yeah.
on your own. And
And I'll
so,
add,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, I'll add though, it's never too late to free play. I think as adults, we can free play as well. We can go wander off on a trail. We can go hang out with friends and not really have a structured activity. Be with friends and community in a way that's not always for an event, but just to have casual conversation. That is the adult version of free play.
Yeah. And with that in mind, another question that I had for you was that as you free played your way through life and you found yourself working as a scientist, what was your first, or what first sparked that interest in you and that inclination? And what made you believe that that could be something meaningful in your life?
Yeah, so I happened upon science because in the early 80s when I was in elementary school, when we looked at history textbooks or social science, they called it then, I really didn't see much that was interesting to me. I didn't feel represented. I didn't feel seen in the history books that we were learning in school here. And we weren't very intentional with our curriculum and curriculum development in elementary school in those years. So I felt like this wasn't about me. This is other people's history. And the closest I felt to being included was learning about Native Americans, believe it or not, because in pictures they also wore two braids. I used to wear two braids to school every day with ribbons at the bottom. And at least they were brown skin and at least they had dark hair and they had long hair and they wore beads and jewelry. And I felt some kind of relationship to Native Americans. But beyond that, I didn't really feel seen in any of the history curriculum. And I loved science. It allowed me to be curious and ask questions. And my intense curiosity as a young person meant that I was asking questions all the time. And science gave me a safe place to do that and to push boundaries and to think out of the box. But then when my mom passed away when I was 14 due to an undiagnosed medical condition, it really kind of solidified my interest in making sure other people don't suffer the way that our family did in losing our mom early. And so I was very focused on doing that. And I did an internship with the Los Angeles Pediatric Society after high school, between high school and college. And that's when I learned I didn't want to pursue medicine, interestingly. Um, we were positioned at a county hospital in the pediatrics ward, but interacted with any department in that county hospital that helped with the care of children. So it was emergency room, it was the burn unit, it was labor and delivery, it was clinic, it was, cystic fibrosis clinic, it was everything. And the one thing I kept hearing from the physicians over and over again at that time is that the system that controls the way medicine was delivered was keeping doctors away from actually caring for their patients. And they said that there needs to be a lot of change in government, in the way insurance is handled, the way reimbursements are handled, the way prior authorizations are managed. And so for me, it seemed like there were too many rules and regulations that prevented a physician from delivering care. And so that became less interesting to me. I felt like half the time I'd be fighting to care for the person I wanted to care for. And so I decided to focus instead on research medicine. And I thoroughly enjoyed my undergraduate experience at Occidental College, which is a small liberal arts school. I got to do a lot of research on campus, got to present papers. It was really quite thrilling and exciting to ask those questions. I spent a year at the NIH between undergrad and graduate school, where I did a little more direct patient related research on cardiovascular disease before heading to graduate school to do a PhD in biophysics. But all along the way, it was pursuing the next question, the next problem. I learned biochemistry, I learned biophysics, but more importantly, in my graduate studies, I learned how to ask a question and how to set up an experiment so that you are actually answering the question, but also being open to unexpected results and then learning how to interpret those. And I think those fundamentals, training yourself how to think, no matter what field you go into, if you are a good thinker, that's going to serve you very well. And but when I was working at Genentech, unfortunately, my dad had a massive hemorrhagic stroke, and we thought he had retired. He was close to retirement. He was on Medicare. We thought he had great insurance. We thought we were doing the right thing. My older brother is a PhD chemist. My middle brother is a mechanical engineer. We all speak English very well. We have time to sit on the phone and ask questions, but we could not navigate the healthcare system to get him the prior authorizations that he needed in time. So then it came back to that question that I learned way back in that internship. And that was, maybe now I am equipped and positioned where I can start to tackle those policy questions. How do we increase access to healthcare? How do we dismantle the barriers? How do we make sure the policies are actually serving the people and not vice versa? And as a good trained thinker now, I felt very confident and comfortable in getting involved in public service. So that was a huge change. Never thought I would do that. I lost my high school student body election, never wanted to run for an election again. And yet here I was running a very public election for school board. And that was the beginning of that change.
That was amazing. I think talking about, I mean, it was inspiring to hear about what sort of motivated you to go down this path initially. What you talked about in terms of asking and answering questions, having the curiosity that's required to go and formulate your experiments and then go
Mhm.
ahead and answer those questions, and your discussion about how that kind of translated and transformed into an interest in community leadership and public office. So I think in one answer, you answered a lot of my questions, which I'm really appreciative of. Um, but I think one question I have for you in that space is that you talked a little bit about what motivated you to kind of expand. Your work in science is already one type of service, and you expanded that service into community leadership and public office. And you talked a little bit about that motivation as well. But if you would please maybe expand on that a little bit, what that looked like, what that shift looked like, how your outlook changed over the course of your career so that you became ready to make that kind of a choice, and what kind of an impact that had on you, and whether that changed your purpose at all.
Well, I think it's still very aligned. The change was really rooted in wanting to answer that higher call of service. Our school board was struggling with financial mismanagement, and there was an audit report that came in that showed that there were 75 individual audit findings, financial records that were not being managed. Well, a scientist is really great at looking at data and tables. We can do that, right? It's just looking at the spreadsheets and seeing our inputs matching our outputs, right? We know how to do that. We can look at data. Additionally, I had a Muslim Indian student approach me when I was working on the town council. It was a volunteer organization that just helps with community service in the local community. And he approached me and asked me, he's like, Auntie, can you help me? The Eid Ramadan is going to fall on graduation in 3 years when I'm graduating, and my counselor doesn't understand this concept of a lunar calendar. And I said, wait a second, how many different cultural groups follow a lunar calendar? Hindus, we follow a lunar calendar for our holidays. Muslims do, East Asians do, Jews do. How can a counselor not understand the concept of a lunar calendar? And then that led me to look at, well, who's creating the policies on our school board? Who's determining what that calendar looks like and what holidays are being acknowledged and which holidays are not being acknowledged? And this kid, he was a freshman in high school, and yet he could figure out that years later, graduation was going to fall in the middle of Ramadan. And that meant that his grandparents might not be able to comfortably watch him walk across the aisle, right? Across the stage. And so that led me to think when you get a question like this coming out of a sincere lack of being seen, a lack of being welcomed in a community, well, that impacts the Hindu community as well. And we've seen that time and time again. So this calling was representation does matter. It does matter. And so when we look at what is our duty, sometimes our duty is to be a public person. Sometimes our duty is that we are positioned in a way that our voice can make things better for other people. And how are we going to do that? When I was looking at my career in biotech, it might be 10 years, maybe, slim chance, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, that a drug I could work on might help save a life. But here in this situation, it became very clear my voice, my advocacy, helping someone feel seen, that could change a life today. And that was a genuine sense of purpose and duty that I hadn't expected to feel, frankly. I didn't know that I would feel that. But it was quite the calling for me to run for school board and start that journey down through public service. It's not easy, right? You get scrutinized on social media, you get attacked, you get when I ran for office, I got people, visiting my house and saying things. So it's not easy to make yourself vulnerable, but when you know you're doing a good thing, it feels good and you know you're doing the right thing. So that keeps me going. That's the fuel. Helping people is the fuel that keeps me going.
Yeah, you definitely touched a lot on the fact that I think you talked about how your purpose sort of, or you discovered that your purpose
Ah,
it has to do with making people feel seen, and how that affected or impacted your transition from, or not really a transition, but an addition in your career portfolio to include the public service space. And thank you so much for that. And I do want to ask you another question
yeah.
related to that. But before I do, just for the audience to know, I will be asking a few more questions. But I did want to remind everyone that we will be taking questions from all of you as well. So please feel free to ask your questions through the YouTube or Facebook chat, and we'll get them answered on this webinar as well. But coming back to our chat, we talked a little bit about this idea of purpose, and how you discovered your purpose, and how that led to you joining school board and starting your public service path. But I wanted to ask if you could expand on this a little bit. Do you
Mhm.
believe that purpose is something that we discover at some point in our life, that it just somehow clicks, that this is what I'm meant to do? or is it something that we gradually build through our choices and responsibilities? And how you came to this conclusion that this making people feel seen is your purpose, and whether that has also evolved since you started your public service journey as well.
Yeah, couple stories that I'll share. One, after my mom passed away, I was in a deep state of depression. I don't think I really acknowledged that at the time. But through that, I kind of rationalized to myself that we all have a purpose. We're here for a purpose, and that is rooted in Hindu values, right? We know that we have a purpose. There is a reason why we're here, but we don't know it necessarily. And my 16-year-old, she's often very philosophical. We call her the free range kid. She was definitely much more hands-off parenting, and she was alone with her thoughts a lot. So she reflects back on her childhood, the sweet age of 16. She's reflecting back on her childhood of like 6 and 7 years old. And she'll say that she doesn't remember gaining consciousness until around 7 years old. She said before that, she was just kind of like tottering along, like just playing and doing nothing. And she didn't really have self-awareness, she thinks, until around 7 years old. And then she realized that she existed and that she has impact on other people, that she can change an outcome through her actions. She said it was around then when she realized, and she would experiment with that, actually. She was just telling us how, Mom, yeah, at the age of 7, I would tell friends that there were imaginary creatures, and then I would wait to see what they would think. Are there imaginary creatures or not? And so she would experiment around a lot about that. And we were talking about what that looked like, what purpose looks like. And I think for some, it comes early. You have a life experience, or you just feel you have a calling. I know people who love animals, just genuinely, like from birth, they have loved animals. And then they go on to be veterinarians or in some way caring for animals, right? So for some people, it starts at a very tender age and they feel it and they pursue it and they're very focused on that. For other people, it comes a lot later. My middle daughter, she for I think years, she just wanted to own a horse ranch in Montana and watch horses run free. That really was her idea of a dream life, is being in a big open countryside watching. She said, and the horses can't work. She didn't want the horses to have to work because they're beautiful creatures. She just wanted to watch them run. And and it was only after she got COVID twice that she thought, okay, wait a second. Maybe there is some purpose for me. And she really reflected on that in her high fever state, sitting in her bedroom by herself with the door closed in quarantine. She had a hard time swallowing medication. She had very hard time swallowing like a Motrin just to reduce her fever. And so she came out of that experience with a sense of purpose. Mom, there are other people who, for whatever reason, can't swallow pills. We should come up with different ways to deliver medicine. We should find different ways. Maybe you have something wrong with your esophagus and you can't swallow, or maybe it is that you just have a phobia around swallowing pills like she does. So it is life experiences that sometimes give people deep purpose. Now she's interning at a biotech company and she's learning about the blood-brain barrier and having medications pass through the blood-brain barrier. So she found that during those tender years when she was in high school. And there are other people yet still who go on to do what they think is their duty. Their parents have asked them to pursue a certain career, and they're very duty bound and adoring of their parents, and they pursue degrees that reflect their family's values, and then later find that, wait a second, this is my passion is somewhere else. And to know that it's okay, right? You also grow and change. You're not the same kid you were at 7. You change, you have life experiences, you build relationships. Maybe your partner has to move to a different location. And that may mean you have to redefine what your future looks like, or your purpose, your duty, your calling. And so life will take you in different places that sometimes very unpredictable.
Yeah. From what you said, it seems like, and I agree that your purpose is, it's of course ever changing. It's different for everybody, and it seems like it's multidimensional too. Like I obviously have my career goals, but I also still like watching horses, and that still is part of maybe not my overall lifelong purpose, but that is still an important part of what makes me who I am. And I feel like for me and for a lot of us, I think, and for you, of course, I think the family values that you have, your Hindu identity that you have, I'm interested in knowing whether you consider that to be a part of your purpose, or
Mm.
whether you consider that if that has impacted what you see as your purpose in today's world, as well as growing up and as you saw your own purpose evolving. How are you able to sort of authentically stay rooted to your Hindu values while serving people across the
Yeah.
board?
For me, it was not easy as a little kid, right? Believe it or not, on the first grade playground, I was called a pagan. And I had no idea what that meant. I would come to school with a bindi in my hair and two braids and sometimes wearing a salwar. And I felt very pretty, right? I felt very proud of who I was wearing that bindi to school. Um, and I got called by several kids on the playground a pagan, and I had no idea what that word meant. Imagine you're in first grade, you're all of it like what, 6 years old, and somebody's using a word on you. And so I go home. I have an elder brother, he's 6 years older than me, and that meant he was very smart all the time. He was so smart. And so I'd ask him, what does this word mean? And he would open the dictionary and we would look up the definition together. And then I went back to school and I finally said, hey, I am a pagan. That's great. I believe in many gods. How amazing is that? And so, it was funny to be able to then come back and say, well, first of all, I'm not going to accept that as degrading or disparaging. I'm not willing to accept that. And I'm willing to share that actually I think who I am is wonderful and beautiful and amazing. That's not easy for many kids. It's really not easy. I also had a very adoring mom who made sure that I felt very well placed in this world and had purpose. But also, as someone who was very curious about sciences, Hindu values and Hindu teachings allow us to be one with sciences. And that's an amazing thing if you think about it. The expanding, contracting universe, right? The cycles of the universe with Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, right? This is very scientifically grounded. Ayurveda, very scientifically grounded. Yoga, very scientifically grounded. Even reincarnation with basic principles of physics. Matter can neither be created nor destroyed. So every time I was studying science, I was finding reinforcement of my Hindu teachings. And I felt more confident that this was fine for me. This was great for me. And so when we had our kids, my husband and I used to teach at our local mandir Gurukul, and it was lovely to reconnect with actually more formal teachings around Hindu scripture and offer that to my children who now have that as part of their deep-rooted ability to find purpose in their communities and with their circles of friends and feel confident to educate others because their friends may not necessarily know how universal Hindu concepts are in Hindu teachings. It's not just philosophy, it's rooted in science. It's beautiful.
It is. It's absolutely both what we would see as a philosophy and something beyond that.
Hmm.
There's an inherent logic in it. And I think what you said about how it hit you that you're not ready for anyone to tell you that any part of your cultural identity is wrong or
Yep.
is in any way inferior to anyone else.
Yep.
So that's absolutely really inspiring. And I do have another question related to that. Um, how do you make difficult decisions? I feel like when you have a lot of these, Hindu Dharma is very, very open. Of course, it's like a science, but like when we think of a science, we think of something that kind of allows us to explore a little bit on our own. And so naturally, we all have our own personal values. And sometimes we feel like maybe our personal values and what we see in nature, whatever evidence is there, whatever other opinions that are there, either from other Hindus or from other people in general. Maybe
Yeah.
all of those things don't fit in the same direction. So
Mhm.
when you're going through life rooted in Hindu Dharma, how do you make difficult decisions navigating the fact that some of these aspects may not all be aligned with each other?
Yeah, I think the first goes back to kind of what even what doctors practice. My experience with the LA Pediatric Society was also a very grounding experience, and I learned that doctors have this philosophy of first of all, do no harm, right? And so I think that really resonates with Hindu values as well. We don't want to hurt people. We don't want to cause pain or discomfort to other people. At the same time, there are stories that when my husband was teaching the Ramayana story to his students in his Gurukul class, of course he's a feminist, so he brought up the issue of is what happened to Sita, was that correct? Was Rama, King Rama, was he actually correct in that? And then, of course, that gets into the cycle of karma dharma, and that Sita had to do what she had to return to the earth, and there was a whole process that had to happen. But unfortunately, we don't always tell that chapter 2 of that story, right? We don't tell what happened next. We always end with Sita walks through the fire and the end, the curtains close. But there's this whole other part of that story that we don't often tell. So these are the kinds of, like, when you think about difficult questions, when you think about, who is being harmed or how the story is being told, you do have to think about how do we take care of people the best. Ultimately, we will not be here, right? Life is short. We're only here for a certain amount of time. So ultimately, what are we going to do to make life better for the people who come after us, people who are here and people who come after us? And I think, there's only so much we could do, but every footprint has an impact. So what are you going to do with where you place your feet? And that's how I go about things. We had some interesting bills in policy to vote on. One of them was on physician-assisted suicide, for example. That wasn't an easy one for me. I had to think about it really deeply. But at the end, I was able to feel grounded in how I cast my vote in support of that process. But there are other really good things that we can do in the spaces that we're in, whether it's being part of your Hindu association at school or at work. We had this lovely association at Genentech called South Asian Network at Genentech. And we were able to network with each other and help each other understand your roles and responsibilities in a company. Well, we can do that in life as well. This organization, for example, you guys have this amazing network now of a social safety net where you can catch each other. We have a very small network in San Diego of Desi, of Hindu elected leaders. And we have this small signal chat of like 5 people, but we catch each other and we help each other when we're struggling with how do we make a decision? What are things we should consider? But we know we're grounded in similar values. So we'll process through the challenge of that decision and not discount or dismiss how challenging the decision might be. And so it's good to have that network of people, not necessarily your best friends who are just going to say, do whatever you want, and we'll love you and support you, but people who will actually challenge and make sure that you're doing your duty.
Of course, I think at the end of the day, doing our duty as we see from a personal standpoint, based on everything that we have, whether it's our dharma or whatever evidence is out there, is the most important aspect, and what the larger network can give us, that support that it can give us in that process, in that really difficult the decision-making
Yeah.
process is really key for us. Thank you for that.
I
And
think
I think,
also
yeah,
usually
go ahead.
what the right thing to do is. I
Yeah,
think usually the harder decision or the wrong decision, you sweat more, right? You know it's the wrong thing to do. When it's the right thing to do, it feels so good, right? You know you're doing the right thing. Your core values tell you you're doing the right thing.
yeah, definitely. And you know that part of that is it comes from what you know, from what you've seen in the network as to what happens when you would take this decision as opposed to that decision. And that network is really important. And you mentioned that we have a small, or you were part of a small network of Hindu public leaders in your community. But even as a larger American ecosystem, Hindu Americans make up a small portion of that community, and they in themselves are a community, and they're part of the larger community as well. And obviously, the need of the hour is for Hindu Americans to definitely become part of that larger ecosystem, and become important figures in that larger ecosystem, as you are as well. And so, one question that I have before we turn it over to the audience as well is that a big part of this webinar series is sort of celebrating the 250th anniversary of America. And so as we mark that anniversary, how do you see this Hindu American network fitting into that future of this country and this ecosystem as well?
Yeah, so that is an important thing to ponder, right? Because oftentimes, depending on where you grew up, if maybe you're in a community where there aren't many other Hindu, much less Indian, much less brown people, right? Maybe you're in a community where you don't have that strong grounding in that. At the end of the day, we're growing up here in America. And this is our home country. We may have ancestral roots, either the same generation, multiple generations back, whatever that looks like, in India or in those value systems and that history. But at the end of the day, we are growing up here. And I think the best thing we can do is to make American society better, make our democracy stronger, and be part of that. Bring our rich dharmic values, our traditions, bring them home to bear fruit for America. Dig in, be part of the community. There's a Swaminarayan community group that reaches out to me every once in a while here in San Diego. And they were asking me for advice. They said, how can we, normally we do fundraising for charitable organizations in India. We want to do something different this year. What can we do? And I said, the biggest need right now is food insecurity. That is really the biggest need in San Diego. Cost of living is really high. We have people from tech workers all the way down to laborers that are struggling with putting food on the table. There are layoffs. People who never thought they would need government assistance are seeking government assistance. And what does that look like? If we, as Indian Americans, as Hindu Americans, can show up and volunteer in public serving institutions in America, then we are seen as strengthening the fabric of American democracy. And that's very important for us to do. So they were very excited. They actually had a wonderful experience filling boxes and bags for the food bank and doing fundraising for the food bank. They did a walkathon and raised quite a bit of money. And now the local San Diego Jacobs Cushman Food Bank is going to celebrate and recognize them as contributors. So it's a wonderful thing. And then what is the second order, tertiary order effect? Our community can see the types of food that's offered in a food bank. And they can say, hey, where are the real vegetarian offerings? Where are the options for that? Are we offering the right kinds of beans and rice, or are we only offering pasta and spaghetti? These are important questions. Are we only offering rice and not wheat? When we participate in acts of service in society in America, we're able to improve the types of services that Americans receive and the options that they are exposed to. I think that's very important. It's also one of the things I learned serving as a commissioner on the California Asian and Pacific Islander American Commission is that oftentimes Asian communities are invisible and ignored because we tend to not ask for help when we need help. And we know our culture best, and we know how to break down those barriers for our own people to feel supported in American life. We need to do, it's time to step up and do that. And I know many folks already are doing that, and that's great. You don't all have to run for office, but there are, nonprofit organizations in your community. There are county and city boards and commission positions. There are state boards and commission positions. And just being present in that space can help people see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that was really insightful, talking about the need of the hour is to kind of immerse ourselves into larger community service projects, which anyways is very much rooted in our own
Yep,
values as Hindus. And so it doesn't deviate at all, and it's definitely something that would definitely help us become integrated with the larger ecosystem. And it's a really important thing. And we have the potential and ability to give back to the community that we are part of. So thank you so much for that.
absolutely.
We're now gonna turn it over to some audience, shift
Sure.
gears a little bit, talk kind of discuss some questions from the audience. So the first question actually goes a little bit back. I think you were talking about the decision-making process. And I think at the end you mentioned that in your heart, or when you're making the right decision versus the wrong decision. The right decision feels better than the wrong decision. And of course, it's different whether or not you
Yeah.
take that decision or the other one. That's a completely different process. But you said that when the decision you're making is the right one. And so one person has asked, how do you personally know when a decision is aligned with your values versus just aligned with ambition or expectation? How do you kind of navigate the two? How do you know when it's a correct decision to make or not? And under what context? Is it good for you? Is it good for somebody else? Is it good for the community? How do you reconcile those differences?
Yeah, so that's lovely, right? When you think about, I don't know how it is for most of the folks on this webinar, but for me growing up, my dad really wanted us to not draw attention to ourselves. In fact, so much so that he was really all about just do what you're supposed to do and don't expect praise. So when we would bring home all A's on our report cards, that was it. We would show the paper and we would be done. That would be the end of it. It was just expected that we would do well. We never got praised for that. And that there is a hollowness that a child feels when that is what it is, because it was hard. It was hard earned. Um, so when we talk about ambition, well, is it ambitious to try to do the best that you possibly can? I don't think so. I don't think so. It's not, if your decision is to unlock all of your potential, do that by all means. Unlock your potential. Like I said, you're here, as far as we know, we're here once in this form as we are. Do the most you can. But maybe like a Marvel comic superhero, do it for the force of good. Do it for good. And I think that's where it is. Don't harm. It's if it's ambitious. Ambition is fine, but if you're harming others in it, then there's some, you should pause for some self-reflection. But it's never a problem to actually put on your resume all of your successes. No one else is going to do that for you. You are now in America, and we know what the culture is here. If you don't praise yourself, no one else is going to praise you. And that's been culturally very hard to write down all your accomplishments. And in fact, it's at one point in time, I was on our volunteer town council and I was explaining all the different activities that I'm involved in. And people are like, wow, no one can be like you. Actually, you can be like me. I just don't watch a lot of TV and I don't play video games. And, there are other ways I find joy. But if, you need that downtime, that's also fine. I'm not judging. People love video games. I'm not going to judge. Engineers need jobs too. But the gaming engineers, that is, we want to keep them employed. At the same time, though, you know if it's going to cause harm to somebody or not. And I think that is kind of where the decision is. I think we have to do some self-promotion. It's okay. I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think what you said will really resonate with everyone because I think, yeah, everyone really struggles with one, the idea that we can take decisions that actually do benefit us individually or help us in our own individual paths so long as they're rooted in dharma. And this idea of kind of going and publicly acknowledging somehow that we are doing this is part of our portfolio, and it is a really important thing that everyone struggles with. So I think it was really nice to hear you say that that is something that is not just acceptable, but it is definitely an encouraged thing, especially in the ecosystem that we're living in. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I made a mistake once. I was working at just when I was early on at Genentech, and I was working really hard as I do. I was very excited about working in biotech. Um, and my boss brought me in for what was called a Gen check at the time. So they give you a spot bonus. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't deserve this. I would be working this hard anyway. And I said, thank you, really appreciate it, but I don't deserve this. I never got a Gen check after that. So,
Wow.
if you protest too much, they may also just make assumptions about your effort and your value
Yeah,
and your boss, your manager, your team. So don't overly compensate on the other side by demurring too much.
absolutely.
That was a
Absolutely.
hard
Thank you.
lesson for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that will definitely resonate with everybody. So thank you.
Yeah.
The next audience question is again, shifting gears a little bit more on your work in public office and kind of the way that you sort of, the question is, how do you navigate the tension between being fully present for your family and fully present for public office? I think you talked a lot about how your family is really important to you. how your parents shaped your life, kind of being involved with your kids' lives as well, even if you kind of you let them free play a little bit, still being involved with everything that they're doing. And so between that and obviously the long hours that you must have as a public servant as well, is there any conflict between the two? How do you kind of balance, and how do the two kind of help each other grow as well at the same time?
I think as a young woman, we had the impression, this is, 90s, the impression that we could have it all. That we could have a really robust, active career, that we could raise a family, that we could be true to our community, and we could do it all. And I had a rude awakening that it's really quite hard to do it all. Not without, if you're going to try to do that, not without a good, equal partner. And my cousins, I have a lot of girl cousins, and they're like, "Oh, you're so lucky you married Jagdish. You're so lucky. You're so lucky." I'm like, "Am I lucky, or did I just choose well?" So, we kind of entered into our relationship on very equal footing. He knew who I was. He knew what my ambitions were, and he knew that I'm very motivated. I knew who he was already. We met when we were both in graduate school. So we both knew who we were as people and what our goals and ambitions were, and we both came to it at an equal footing, equal standing, and we supported each other no matter what. And we continue to do that. And I think part of what allows me to be successful is we take those turns. It's not 50-50 all day, every day. It's not, it's the ledger doesn't balance out until the end of life. And so some days, he worked at a small startup company in San Jose, and we're here in San Diego. So for 18 months, he was traveling Monday through Friday to the Bay Area, and the kids were really little at the time. And so that was the burden was shifted onto me. And but for me, it was very, very important to be there to tuck my kids in at night, to read them their bedtime stories, to be there for their last weird questions they ask as they drift off to sleep, to answer those questions as best as I can, to be present. That was very important for me. And now that the turn has come for me. Now I leave Monday through Thursday to go to Sacramento, and I have a residence up there, and I stay there. And luckily, we have technologies, so I Zoom with my kids. I FaceTime with my kids all the time. But two are in college now, and they're quite independent, and they've had that reassurance and the stable household life to give them the confidence to know that they can achieve anything that they put their minds to. But it's always about dharma and effort and doing your duty, even for them. So thankfully, the way my trajectory has been is it's worked out in a way that I can more or less maintain balance. But those early years when I was working at Genentech and we had two kids, and before the third one was born, and one would get a fever, and then 3 days later the other one would get a fever, and then it's 6 days you can't send your kids to childcare. And then who's going to miss 6 days of work? I have a culture that's growing in the lab that needs attention. My husband has coding and deadlines and tape outs that he has to deal with, right? So who is going to miss work? And it became tension in our household. And if we didn't have respect for each other, those would have been difficult days to navigate. So it's about having an honest relationship with your partner. You can't have it all. That is just, it's a false reality. You're not going to it's just like multitasking. There's no actual cognitive process of multitasking. It's rapid task switching. And relationships are a lot like that. I could not have gone and done what I am doing right now without the support of my family. 100%. That is not possible. And those that do it without the support of their family, more power to them, because that is a heavy lift. And it's when you feel that calling to serve, it's such a deep, profound, magnetic force. It's hard to resist. But if you don't have that support at home, then hopefully they have friends and neighbors and other loved ones in their lives that can help catch the pieces, because inevitably they fall.
Of course. Thank you. I think you mentioned that family is not just behind you, but also at the forefront of your entire process, whether it's in public service or also in your career. Um, and so I think the way that you said that, I think family is still always there, and making sure that they are prioritized It doesn't take away from your career in any sense, but it's an integral part of your life as well, and how family can be the support system that also propels your career. That is the real balance. So thank you so much.
And also to
And
be
yeah.
open to that feedback. My children, it's not easy to receive feedback from adult children, much less
Mhm.
children. But I learned how to be open to feedback from them. And what that means is that we can have a really honest relationship. And sometimes it's hard. It's not easy. Oh, mom, you're exposing me. Please don't expose me like that. Or, whatever it is, right? Um, and but to be honest and open with those conversations, that's the best way to move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the final audience question that I have for you, um, I'm going to paraphrase it just a little bit.
Sure.
But the essence of the question is that for anyone in the audience who is interested in pursuing law or public service, what advice would you give them? And any student who's kind of starting to explore that path. And I wanted to tack on one additional thing to that.
Mhm.
You have a lot of titles yourself. You yourself are heavily involved in public service, that kind of comes from a lot of different career spaces as well. So when you think about your personal dharma, and you think about the path that you followed, from a career standpoint, from the public service standpoint, how are the two related to each other? What remains at the center of your personal dharma? How is this path that you've chosen in public service? How does that augment your definition of your personal dharma, and where does that fall? So a little twofold
Yeah.
question there. Yeah.
So for me, it was always about helping people. Even when I wanted to pursue research, biotech research, drug delivery, it was about helping people. I couldn't fix my situation, but could I help other people not have the same heartache that I had? How can I help them do that? And so whatever door I'm walking into, it's about helping people and either connecting people to resources or connecting people to better experts than me, someone who can help them solve problems, being that connector, the joiner, the person who helps find people's solutions. I love that. I love untangling a really bad knot. Whether it's actually physically, I used to untangle my friends' necklaces or whatever. I love sitting in a problem and starting to break it apart. And oftentimes society's problems are as equally intransigent as some of our biotech, our disease unraveling problems. So I find a little bit of personal joy in that. It's not just that I feel good helping people, but also the process, the journey of solving a problem, of untangling a knot, also brings me a lot of joy. I don't mind being in a difficult thought space, right? It feels okay to struggle. It's actually good to struggle a little bit. And coming to that realization for me helped me be present in the midst of heartache. And I think that was a hard thing as a young person to be present in the midst of heartache. But because I had that to go through, I now have perspective on what's really impossible and what's really possible, what's probable. I can do this. And for those who are looking at public service, um, experiment, tinker. Don't fear failure. You have to try. And I think if you're able to succeed, imagine the impact that you will have. It could be profound, right? So it's worth it. It's worth a shot. And many people run for office and don't win the first time. They don't even win the second time. So you have to keep trying and try different angles. Start with a local board or commission. Volunteer on a budget committee for your city council, your citizens budget committee, or your status of women and girls committee, or whatever it might be. Find a way to get involved, and then also uplift others. So we have an organization here in San Diego called SD Nari, and it's a women's organization that helps women who are being or who are in abusive relationships. And what I was able to do is I learned about this organization years ago, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. But now, as an assembly member, I have the opportunity to recommend to my Speaker of the State Assembly appointments to a commission, a statewide commission that helps with trafficked and abused women. And I thought, wow, oh my goodness, Sandhya Ramanujan, she was amazing in SD Nadi. I'm going to nominate her. And lo and behold, now we have our first Hindu Desi American woman serving on this state commission because I didn't stop with me. So when you decide to run for office or when you decide to sit in a seat of power, know that you are not only helping yourself, you are also helping others. You're a role model for others. You have the opportunity to nominate others, to lift people up into these spaces. That's why representation matters. It's not just because you get to sit in the seat and represent your community, but it's because you get to pull a lot of people with you all the time. And that's also a great part of why you should try. You should do it.
Thank you so much, Darshana ji. I think after hearing you, of course, everyone on this call is going to be inspired to pursue public service, both from the standpoint that it can really, really help, but also because it can help both internally as well as externally. It's an integral part of personal dharma, which, of course, duty is a very large, if not the most integral part of. So, and in general, I think thank you so much. I had a wonderful
Yeah,
time chatting with you today,
it's
and I
great.
learned so much from you. I'm sure the audience learned a lot from you as well. So thank you so much for giving your time and
Yeah,
all of your
thank you.
experience to us. I'm going to now turn it back over to Pranav to conclude the program. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnav and Darshanaji, for such a thoughtful and inspiring conversation tonight. I think to echo what he said, hearing how personal dharma has shaped your journey from research to public service, it gives us so much to reflect on as we're all thinking through our own paths and our own purposes. And to everyone who joined us live tonight, thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this conversation. Just to reiterate, this is just the first of our four-part Dharma in America series, and the next three sessions will be happening every Sunday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the next 3 weekends. Next Sunday, July 26th, we will be joined by Amitji Mishra to explore the topic of Dharma in family and relationships. So we do hope you will tune back in for that one. And on behalf of Hindu Yuva, thank you again to our speaker, our moderator, and all of you watching. Namaste, and we'll see you next Sunday.